Goedemiddag, good morning. My name is Kaarina Ruta. I work for the Welsh Local Government Association. I'm going to talk about the evidence supporting the introduction of a default 20 mile an hour speed limit on restricted roads in Wales. Before going into the evidence supporting the introduction, I'd just like to take you back very briefly and give you an overview of how we got to where we are. The setting of national speed limits was devolved in 2018, and in May 2019, our First Minister Mark Drakeford said in the Senedd, "We know that 20 mile an hour zones reduce speed of traffic, reduce accidents, particularly accidents to children, and we want to see that become the default position right across Wales." The task force group was set up soon after that, and it published its report in July 2020. The report recommended the use of pilots to test not whether 20 mile an hour should be introduced or not, but to test the various processes around engagement, communication, enforcement, the GIS mapping tool for determining exceptions, and to set up a monitoring framework. The Welsh Government accepted all the recommendations and held a debate in the Senedd, which ended in a vote to support the Welsh Government's intention to commence the process with cross-party support. 8 first-phase settlements in 7 local authorities were chosen to represent various sizes of villages, towns and parts of a city, and urban and rural roads. These settlement-wide 20 mile an hour limits were introduced between spring 2021 and spring 2022. A public consultation by Welsh Government was held during summer 2021, and legislation was introduced in the Senedd on the 12th of July 2022 to change the speed limit on restricted roads from 30 to 20 miles an hour. Another consequential piece of legislation to make modifications to the traffic signs regulations and general directions was made in summer 2022. Both statutory instruments came into force on the 17th of September this year. So why a default 20 mile an hour speed limit? What is the case for change? There is a long list of legislation and strategies underpinning the introduction of 20 miles an hour, but 2 are particularly relevant. The Wellbeing of Future Generations Act 2015 underpins everything. Wales is the first country in the world to have legislated for the well-being of current and future generations in a way that ties in with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Secondly, there is Llwybr Newydd, which means new path. This is Wales's transport strategy, which was published in 2021. It sets out Welsh Government's vision for how our transport system can help us deliver our priorities for Wales, helping to put us on a pathway to creating a more prosperous, green and equal society with an accessible, sustainable and efficient transport system. So, road safety first. In 2022, police forces in Wales recorded a total of 3,315 road collisions, broadly similar to the numbers seen in previous years. And over half of those road collisions occurred on 30 mile an hour roads. A recent public health study estimated that the 20 mile an hour default speed limit in Wales could result every year in 40% fewer collisions, 6 to 10 lives saved, and 1,200 to 2,000 people avoiding injury. It is obviously also hoped that making streets safer for walking, cycling and wheeling and playing hopefully encourages more people to do so, especially for shorter trips. Where it replaces a car trip, it will also improve air quality and reduce carbon emissions. More people being active will help improve their physical and mental well-being. And it's also about places, making places nicer places to live in. So going back to the task force group report and the evidence. It shows the report showed a move away from the traditional way of casualty-led focus of road safety to a more holistic approach to road safety. where road safety is more than about the avoidance of being injured. It must also address the perception of risk of harm and freedom from harm and its manifestation at the individual, community, and societal levels. There is lots of international evidence suggesting a strong relationship between speed and the number of collisions, meaning that any decrease in mean speeds is associated with a decrease in the number of collisions and injured road users. Slower speed limits in built-up areas are supported by the World Health Organization, and the United Nations Stockholm Declaration states that we, as the participating nations, resolve to mandate a maximum road travel speed of 30 kilometers an hour in areas where vulnerable road users and vehicles mix in a frequent and planned manner, except where strong evidence exists that higher speeds are safe. And this is the wording that has been used in Wales's exceptions guidance. What about evidence from the UK and elsewhere in Europe? It is surprisingly actually that 20 mile an hour and 30 kilometre an hour speed limits have been introduced for quite a long time already, but there isn't that much evidence and consistent monitoring that has been undertaken. I would like to draw your attention to this wonderful report published by PACTS and funded by the Road Safety Trust, Lower Urban Speed Limits in Europe. What it finds is that 20 mile an hour limits in the UK without physical measures result in modest speed reductions, typically 1 to 2 miles an hour, where before speeds are approximately 25 miles an hour, and reductions of 3 to 5 miles an hour, where before speeds are approximately 30 miles an hour. And this is very much the same that has been found from the monitoring in the first phase settlements in Wales. It also said that 20 mile an hour limits without physical measures result in approximately 11% fewer casualties than before in the UK. The number of collisions hasn't been reported on in the first phase settlements yet, but will be obviously going forward through the national framework. And going back to the report, the PACTS report, it says that very few studies have attempted to assess the outcomes in relation to other goals set, such as increasing walking and cycling, air quality, noise, and so on. So we hope that Wales's comprehensive monitoring framework will contribute to the evidence going forward. Lessons learned from the rollout so far. It is obviously still very early days, but what we have learned so far is that meaningful engagement with the public is key. So it is the only way to explain to people not only what is happening, but why it is happening. And although we knew that awareness of the policy was very high before the change, before the coming into force, it seems that we have learned that that the public is not generally familiar with signing of speed limits and the highway code more generally. The Welsh approach has created a common standard, albeit with local variations, of residential streets where pedestrians and cyclists and motorised vehicles mix to have a 20 mile an hour speed limit as recommended by the United Nations and World Health Organizations, and one that will become more commonplace in future in many other countries. And there is some early evidence of speeds decreasing across Wales. And I would like to thank Richard Owen from Agilicis for his report that was published with some very early data. It was always clear that by introducing a signs-only scheme, we were not going to achieve compliance everywhere and straight away, but any drop in speeds is a good thing. The problem obviously is with this kind of policy that the seemingly negative impacts of it, the I have to drive slower, are instantaneous and individual, yet the positive impacts, the modal shift, the health benefits and the community benefits are less visible and less obvious in the short term and to the individual, but will become more obvious to the society as a whole in the longer term. But really what we're talking about here is behaviour change, and behaviour change is a process, not an event, and we are but at the beginning of it. Behaviour change will be achieved over time through further community engagement, speed management measures, enforcement and communication. So now turning to the National Monitoring Framework, it was published in September this year. Transport for Wales is doing the monitoring on behalf of Welsh Government. It follows very much what has been monitored in the first phase settlements already, but adds some key performance indicators that could not be monitored because of the small scale and short period of time. So the task force group report already set out an initial list of desired outcomes for the 20 mph implementation. So on the left here is the rationale for intervention, which is to improve well-being of people in Wales. In the middle are the core objectives of 20 mph based on Wales's transport strategy. And those are to reduce injury and death, to encourage a change in travel behaviour, and to reduce negative effects of vehicle use on the wider environment. And then on the right are the desired outcomes. So reducing the number of pedestrians and cyclists killed, encouraging modal shift, reducing motor vehicle dominance, and reducing carbon emissions, and improving local air quality. So this is a slightly more complicated slide with all the key performance indicators for assessing the effects of the 20 mph speed limit. So we have a number of speed indicators, then a number of collision indicators, and then in green the modal shift indicators, in orange the air quality ones, and then finally also the change in public attitudes, so the more qualitative analysis of this. So in March of this year, the first monitoring report of the first phase settlements was published, and the conclusions were that on average motorists were driving slower in all of the first phase settlements, so the mean speeds reduced by an average of 3 mph. There has been a minimal impact on journey times, and active travel increases were greater in schools within the 8 communities than compared to other schools that were monitored. So what are the next steps? We're currently gathering feedback from all highway authorities about the application of the exceptions criteria, so those roads that have remained at 30, and that will now feed into the setting local speed limits guidance in Wales, which is to be published next year. We'll continue to work together with the police and GoSafe, our All Wales Road Casualty Reduction Partnership, and other emergency services to ensure engagement and enforcement will start at the right moment and target the right places. Going forward, highway authorities will want to understand speeds and compliance and to be able to prioritise roads for speed management, whether that will be enforcement or what we would like to call it place-led speed management measures, like removing centre lines, reducing carriageway width, bus priority measures as well, and other things like using planters. Linking to all this, to the 20 mph is also Welsh Government is currently out with a consultation on a new road safety strategy, and Welsh Government is also committed to introducing legislation to tackle problems caused by pavement parking. Thank you for listening, and I would be happy to answer any questions.